Hi, everyone. So, I said I was going to jump on every week and discuss Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. And I did a little introduction based on her introduction last week. So, if you're following along, I'm only at this point doing one chapter because there's so much good stuff. So if I get to a chapter and I feel like it's light on something, I might continue on to the next. But if you're reading along, I'm pretty much doing a chapter a week. And P.S., this chapter was so good, just chapter one, that I read it twice because there's so much good stuff in here. And so appropriate for our discussions, things I discuss with my coaching clients, things that I really encourage, things in my personal development and my personal growth stuff that I do with my coach. So I will talk a little bit about this. So this chapter starts pretty much with unworthiness. Now, it sounds like, I don't know, that has such a negative connotation. And she goes in and she talks about how unworthiness is really manifests in many different ways. So it is, if you've ever felt alone or powerless or inconsequential in something that you do, if you focus on what is or could be wrong, if instead of focusing on what's right, and mainly to do with you, your emotions, your behavior, your body. And I think ultimately we all have this picture. And if you haven't ever felt this, I would be shocked, but also it would be kind of cool to know if you've never felt this because, wow, what a great mindset you have. It's that feeling of, if I only could do this one thing, if I could only fix this one attribute, if I could only be better, right, with this one thing, whether it's be thinner, be more successful, have more money, right, have a bigger house, whatever it is, if only then I'll be happy, then I'll relax, then I'll accept myself, then things will be better. So that bit is really your self-worth. You're really telling yourself that you're unworthy. Now, I do a lot of personal growth work, and I have a meditation that I do, and it's actually on the Calm app. I have done both Headspace and Calm, and this last year I did Headspace, and so this year I flipped it and did Calm just to have difference. So when people ask me, that I could compare them if they wanted. And one of my meditations, he talks about self-worth, and it's about worthiness and self-compassion. And he quotes Brene Brown. And I guess Brene Brown states that worthiness is a birthright, not something we earn. But we oftentimes go back to that feeling of, if only, right? If only I can do this one thing, and then berate ourselves for not doing it. This whole concept, Tara in this book, I think she says it's I forget what she's saying, the trance of unworthiness that takes hold in you. So she focuses on the Buddhist kind of method because that's how she found her own personal strength and growth. And I have told many people that if I had to pick some sort of spirituality, I am very drawn to Buddhism. I would not consider myself a Buddhist, but if you follow along on these or read this book, would understand why. So at one point, she's talking about how Buddhism really focuses on the goodness of things, right? And not the faults, which reminds me very much of gratitude practice. So one of the first steps, if I have a client or a friend who is starting mindfulness practice, one of the first steps is a gratitude practice because it focuses on what is good. And you can do gratitude practices that are very simple. In fact, I think this month I'm going to start it with my kids, where they just write down one thing a day, just one thing that they're grateful for, because you can really get into the habit of doing this, whether it's with a partner for a relationship, and just every day saying, I'm grateful for, for instance, my husband. I'm grateful for his sense of humor. I'm grateful for his dedication to his job. I'm grateful for his dedication to his children. I'm grateful for how much he cares for me, his ability to see the good in me, all of those things. When you focus on those instead of all of the faults, it makes it easier to develop a more meaningful relationship with somebody else. And whether that gratitude is with a partner or your mother or your child, it will help. Also, with that gratitude, you can do it for things that you are grateful for, and body. I spend a lot of time working on my self-compassion stuff, and it can be difficult, but oh so worth it. So she does make a point to say that she does a little story, and she talks about how they asked the Dalai Lama about something about self-hate or feeling down on yourself. And the Dalai Lama was very confused because I think what he said, I have lots of notes, so bear with me. He said something like, how can this be when we're all Buddha, right? Like, so how can you not like yourself, or how can you feel alone or outside when we're all connected, which is really beautiful. So she goes on. What I like about this book is it's not pure Buddhist, where you go through the principles and then perhaps have a side of it. What I like is that she does a lot of work in talking about what is inherent in our culture. And this unworthiness is really prevalent in our culture. I'm sure you see it every day. Whether it's some believe, right? So she says some believe it's living up to an ideal, right? Even from childhood, we sometimes feel like we are supposed to be this. I'm supposed to be more patient, or prettier, or more feminine, or smarter, or whatever it is. And when we don't reach that ideal, we make ourselves the enemy, and we feel like it's our unworthiness, which is a really terrible place to be in. Now she also goes in and says, how do you manage your inadequacies? Because the fact is that you may feel unworthy, but you're worthy by birthright, according to Brene Brown. And we all have inadequacies, right? There is no perfect being. So how do you deal with it when you're feeling inadequate in some way, shape, or form? And she talks about these, right? Like, a lot of times people can do self-improvement projects, or they'll shy away from risk. They'll withdraw from the present situation. I'm really good at that. They fill up to-do lists. I'm not very good at that. They set really impossible tasks or demands of themselves, right? And then criticize themselves and others for not living up to that same ideal. These are just ways that manifest that unworthiness. So when Tara talks about that in the book, she says that when I talk about this with my students, people relate, right? And she actually does some meditation on this, and she said many people cry because it's felt so deep within us. The other thing that she mentions, which is really, I guess, hits home for me, is the connection piece. Because when you feel unworthy, oftentimes it is the feeling of not being accepted, of not fitting in, of feeling like you have to change in order to be part of something else. And it really hits home because I'm an attachment parenting leader, and I really work really hard on connecting with my kids for that exact reason. Because I don't want them to think that I am not accepting of who they are, or that they have to change to be something. She tells this really sad story in chapter 1 too, where, and this is very common, right? It's a family, they go out to eat. There's a little girl, and the parents order, and the waitress asks the little girl what she wants, and she says, I want a hot dog and fries, blah, blah, and a whatever, and a Sprite. I forget what it is. And the father says, no, she will have meatloaf with mashed potatoes and broccoli and a side of milk, right? And the waitress turns to the little girl and says, what do you want on your hot dog? Now, the saddest part is that afterwards, the little girl looks at her parents. I'm going to cry just saying this. I must be super emotional. She says, that woman thinks I'm real. Because there's something in all of us that we want to be understood and felt and heard, both, in the mind of someone else. We don't want to be brushed off as that's not okay, or your opinion doesn't matter. And we in this society do that a lot, not only to children, but to all sorts of people for all different reasons. Ultimately, this is connection. And I feel like that lack of empathy and connection and communication with people can really just cultivate the feeling of unworthiness in people. So when I do parent coaching, I often talk about connection and how we have to learn to accept, ACCEPT, and not expect things. That just getting to that present moment and accepting it is what it is so important to everyone involved in the situation. So I'm looking at my notes. Like I told you, copious amounts of notes. I kind of love all of that. It's when she also talks, so that whole idea of connecting, and then that whole idea of what you do when you feel unworthy and not connected, huge steps, but also gives you a little bit of insight about how switching the mindset. So this is actually a conversation I've had with my own coach. Because we've coached other people, we have talked and talk a lot about psychology. We have often asked each other, like, what's one, if you could change one thing for someone, what would it be that would change their lives? And she always says gratitude, like a gratitude practice, which I've talked about how important that can be, how much it shifts. And I always say mindset, because the neuroscience behind mindset is so important. And I think both of those things are touched on. I mean, she doesn't say it explicitly, but that's pretty much what she's talking about. She talks also about that manifestation of unworthiness, that you end up creating an enemy, right? Now, sometimes you create that enemy within yourself, and that comes with guilt and shame and berating yourself. Like, oftentimes, even if people say that they have a really decent self-esteem, oftentimes when they talk to themselves, it's not nice, right? If they say that they're motivating yourself, but you're motivating yourself through being mean to yourself or talking bad to yourself, that's unworthiness. That's not a good mindset to have. Because the fact is, if you motivate yourself with that, you will never get to a place where it'll be any better, because something else will happen, right? If I just lose those 10 pounds or get to my goal weight, but then you get to your goal weight and you realize you don't have the muscle tone that you want, right? Or that, now I can run a mile, but I can't do whatever else. So instead, sometimes we create the enemy within ourselves. Sometimes we create the enemy in others. And what that does is it's a way of projecting our own fears really onto someone else and takes that feeling of vulnerability and defensiveness and literally just divides people. Now, I will try not to be political, but I have to say, over the last year, maybe even 2 years, there has been a lot of divide. I've seen it amongst my friends. I've actually cried over it because I've said to my husband, I'm having a really hard time with people that I care about now being so derisive to each other. And there's like this huge divide because I think that there's so much fear, right? And projection of that fear. And we cling to any piece that will make us feel better, right? Give us some power. And that ends up dividing us from other people who might not think the exact same way. And no one wants to hear there's not a definitive answer, right? So you see this all the time, whether it's within families and it's a family fight, whether it's cultural, whether there's wars that have been going on for long periods of time. It's really easy to channel those fears and feelings of unworthiness by creating that enemy so that you can channel it into that. Basically, if you can then notice that that's happening and then channel back to yourself. And this, by the way, I consider this judgment work. So this is a great book. If you want some more work and don't mind spirituality a little bit more or religious stuff a little bit more, Gabby Bernstein has a great book on judgment detox. What I love about judgment detox is they're basically saying that when we judge others, it is usually a reflection of some fear within ourselves, right? And this is true in this section of the chapter where she's talking about creating enemies, because if we did not have that feeling of unworthiness in ourselves, then we wouldn't be projecting fear. We would be projecting love, right? We would be looking on the gratitude side of things. It's a mind shift, right? A flip of that mindset. I'm checking my notes again so that I can stay on topic because, I can talk forever and ever and ever. This is many negative feelings are, I'm looking at the things I wrote down. Many negative feelings are rooted in fears of being separate from, I have a low network connection, so bear with me. I'm switching over. Okay. So hopefully that wasn't too jarring. So that fear of not being accepted or not belonging, we all relate to, but I think most of us can remember in adolescence that feeling. And I've talked with many parents about how middle school is the roughest because you're just starting a huge jump in your prefrontal cortex and your body is changing. So with puberty, you go through like this secondary, basically toddlerhood, where things are different and you're getting used to it. And there's a lot of acceptance and there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of feelings of, will I fit in? Will people accept me? Will my parents accept me? Can I accept myself? It makes it really difficult to have solid relationships with peers because we're so afraid of judgment that this is the time where you see bullying really bad because it's really hard to stand up for someone when you don't know how you feel about yourself, right? So that is why middle school is wickedly tough. And then as we grow into teenagers getting used to this new us, we want to foster that connection even more. And it's often a time where they feel connected to peers more, often because there's that break of I'm not the little kid that my parents love or can control or accept if I'm goth, or, well, that was my childhood, right? Goth. But I don't know what they do now, but whatever it might be. And I think that is a little bit of an easy thing to remember. We definitely do that. Now, as we move through there, I would love to have a whole discussion about teenagers and how to help them with that idea of unworthiness and breaking that. My number one suggestion, P.S., as a parent and coach, is connection. When you can connect and have good communication, it really helps with that. All right, moving on, because like I said, she has so much great stuff. And this is chapter 1, everyone. Chapter 1 of Radical Acceptance. This is it, just chapter 1. She then quotes a famous Buddhist who said, quote, "Without anxiety of perfection. You want to live without the anxiety of imperfection," which really should be a tenet of radical acceptance, right? Like, what is radical acceptance? It's accepting what is, and not giving any negative judgment to any of the imperfections, right? Oh my gosh, but I really need to lose weight. Oh my gosh, look at all my wrinkles and my baggy eyes because I didn't do a filter when I did this live, right? Whatever it might be, letting go of that. When we do that, right? When we let go of the anxiety of the imperfection, we can see things as facts and kind of cancel out the fears, right? Because it is what it is. I am who I am in this moment, right? And it also allows us to react a little bit with compassion. And that's something else that I think in this society is sorely lacking, because we're quick to judge. And right now, our society as a whole, globally, has been dealing with fear and anxiety for a year. So there's a lot to deal with. And you can see it very clearly in the lack of compassion for others. I feel like compassion leads to connection, which again takes away those feelings of unworthiness. So it builds people's ability to see themselves in a decent light. But it's really tough for you to see someone in a decent life if you can't see yourself in a decent life. And trust me, personally, I have been there where, it's so much easier to give compassion to someone outside of myself, right? Or it's funny how you listen to yourself talk to yourself. If you actually played that out loud, sometimes I would be appalled because I would never talk like that to a friend. Sometimes I wouldn't even talk like that to a stranger. And I'm talking like that to myself. So it's feeding all of those fears, all of those ideas of unworthiness. So I think she, like I said, I have notes and notes and notes. She also talks about, I wrote on here, incomplete, those feelings of incomplete. And we really want you to feel whole. So with the end of this chapter, she goes through a mini meditation, and I would consider this kind of a challenge. So because I'm doing these weekly, I think it would be great to end with, I'm glad she did it this way. Thank you for making my life easy to wrap this up, is a mini challenge on a step towards your own radical acceptance, your own self-compassion, your own breaking down of the trance of unworthiness, as she would say. And basically, I guess what I'll do is introduce it and then go into the different aspects that she talks about. Basically, what she does is she says, you're going to think about how you personally experience acceptance, and the flip side of that shame or judgment. And then how you experience that both with yourself and with others, right? And ultimately, we are going to be looking at how you relate to your own thoughts, your own body, your own emotions, and your own behaviors, because sometimes it's, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that, or I did that, or why do I always, that kind of thing. And a lot of this is mindfulness. So first, she would like you to kind of do a mini evaluation. So sometime today, find a quiet space and recognize where you are in your own journey with your fears and beliefs of unworthiness in yourself. Like, do you reject or accept your body as it is? Do you blame yourself if you get sick? Do you question whether you're attractive enough? Are you satisfied with how your hair looks? Are you embarrassed about the aging of your face or body? I literally just made comments about that. Do you judge yourself for being too heavy or too thin or not physically fit enough? Do you accept your mind as it is? Do you have any judgments, for example, that you're not as intelligent as you want to be, or as humorous, or you're not happy with how you forget or remember things? Are you critical of any of your obsessive thoughts or anxiety thoughts or depressive thoughts? Are you shamed, right? Are you shamed if you have judgmental thoughts? This is a tricky one. I'll do a little caveat here. Sometimes in the very beginning, when I started doing this type of work, I would be very observant of my judgments of others. And then I would say to myself, hold up, judgy, which literally is a judgment of myself. Like I'm judging myself for judging. So it gets to that kind of little bit of crazy, which I always laughed about. But how do you feel about that? Do you kind of berate yourself in your head for doing that? Sometimes this is interesting too. Some people will say, no, I'm totally, I feel good about myself. And then sometimes when you meditate, you get angry at yourself. So I do that. So I meditate daily. I do mindful meditation. And sometimes I would say that, oh my gosh, I couldn't meditate today. Like I just couldn't do it. But you know what that was? That was unworthiness in myself. That was me criticizing myself because I couldn't, quote, get in the zone. So sometimes we have crazy thoughts that just go and go and go. And instead of accepting that and moving on, we criticize ourselves because we have in our mind that things are only done one way, and that's the correct way. And that's almost never the case. So be observant of that. How about emotions? So she talks about emotions. Do you accept your own emotions? If you cry, do you condemn yourself for being depressed? I don't even know why I'm depressed. Like, this is terrible. I'm terrible for everybody else, and now everybody's suffering, or I have nothing to really be depressed about, or right? Or maybe shame. You feel ashamed, perhaps if you're jealous of someone else. You can be critical of yourself. Are you critical of your impatience? I'm looking at all you homeschoolers because I know I say that to myself. Oh my gosh, where is my patience today? Or if you're irritable or intolerant, if you're having a bad day, are you super critical of that? I shouldn't get angry. I shouldn't do these things. Or feel like a really bad person because of your behavior. So instead of accepting that that was the behavior, apologizing for that behavior, do you beat yourself up about that behavior? You feel guilt. You feel shame. Do you hate yourself for acting a certain way? So I'm a person who, quite frankly, is an oversharer, and I hate quiet. It makes me like wickedly nervous, although I'm better now. Um, so if I'm in a room with people, I fill that space with talk, and then I hate that I do that and berate myself afterwards. So like I'll leave the space, and whether that's like driving home or walking home or whatever, and then literally be beating myself up in my head about why do I do that? I hate that I do that. That's a terrible way now. And then I feel judged. I feel like everybody's like, oh my gosh, what is up with that person? Um, are you disgusted by any of your behaviors, such as compulsive eating or smoking or drinking alcohol? Are you mad at yourself because you feel like you're not as far on your spiritual pathway, right? Or perhaps you're super upset with yourself for not putting others before yourself. So you're feeling like, maybe you didn't show enough compassion for others, or you didn't give everything you could have given. Um, are you critical of falling short in a relationship and blaming yourself? Um, are you feeling guilty or that there's something wrong with you because of your lack of intimacy? Do you really get down on yourself for not accomplishing enough, not standing out, not excelling in something you think you should? So she says the other part of this exercise, when you think about all of those things, those are all how you're relating to yourself. Those are all indicative of this cycle, or she would say trance of unworthiness. And she says an easy thing to think about is, or an easy exercise to relate is, if you think of a person that you've met or you are inspired by or you look up to, but you don't know them super well, right? You might have met them once or something, but you're not really good friends. The not knowing well is important, because if you think about that person who you respect or you look up to, and you think about, what do I want this person to know about me? Like, what parts of myself am I proud of that I would want them to really know? And then, what do I not want them to know about me? Like, if I had a magic ball and I said we could be best of friends and they would only know this and they would never know this, what would it be? It's a way of observing how you feel about yourself, right? And how you feel about all those different aspects of yourself, because we all have aspects of ourselves, and learning to accept them as they are and not judge them for being good or bad is the key. So the challenge for this week, I know, long-winded, Chad. As you go through each day and you catch yourself in different moments, and if you're not good at catching yourself, if you'll avoid this, and I say that with love and compassion because I do that, like not wanting to face my own fears or shame or guilt, because I have a lot of it, I might avoid doing these challenges. But I encourage you not to. If it helps, set a digital reminder, whether that's an alarm on your phone or your watch, or a physical reminder, a little post-it that you will see in different places around, like one in your car, one on your front door, one on the refrigerator, one on your bathroom mirror, things of that nature, just to remind yourself. And here is the challenge, right? Stop and say, do I accept myself just as I am right now in this moment? Do I accept myself just as I am in this moment? And without judging, just observe how you feel at that moment, right? Just observe. I'm feeling nervous, or I'm feeling not confident, or I'm feeling upset that I yelled, or I'm not liking that I tried on clothes and they don't fit, or whatever it might be. observe these, because the key to radical acceptance is really recognizing that we have these feelings of unworthiness, breaking that cycle by being present in the moment, right? Being present with whatever it is, and understanding how we personally relate to ourselves, right? Like I said before, how I relate to my body, how I relate to my emotions. And you can use tools to change this. But this was a great first chapter and kind of uncovering some of the cultural biases towards unworthiness, really, like how we perpetuate that as a society. And oftentimes, indigenous cultures, and the way old societies functioned, there was a lot more connection. So there was a lot less of that culture of unworthiness. Now it's very clear to see, and just different aspects. Like, do you judge, like, do you look at your kids with fear, right? Because you're afraid that they're not going to get into college, they're not going to go to college, they're not going to have a career, they're not going to have a good long-term relationship, they're not, right? Or sometimes we're critical of them. Like, are they reflecting badly on me? Does that make me a bad parent because my kid wears pajamas everywhere? Whatever it is, right? And it's so easy to see in our culture, right? Like how we judge people. Did you go to college, right? There's judgment around there. Did you do this, right? Are you this, right? There's judgment around there, and lack of connection and lack of acceptance just for who you are, right? So really love this challenge. I really am liking this book so far. Of course, we're only one chapter in, so I reserve the right to hate it later. But join me next week. We will look at chapter 2. I would love to hear your thoughts. No one jumped on live. A couple of people jumped on live here. If you have thoughts, opinions, even if they're differing, or especially if they're differing, because I love to hear the different aspects, please comment below. I will also post this on my page, so on my business page, so you can comment on my personal page or on my business page. If you're having a tough time with the challenge, also, if you accept the challenge, I would love to know who's doing it along with me. And I would like to celebrate that win, that one step forward in breaking that cycle, because as a coach, I'm always celebrating the wins. It's really important that you do that and realize the good, right? All right. So until next week.